People will come, they'll get their blood test, they'll have a consult with me.
Tonight, a doctor from the UK does what he can for the unhoused in Kenora.
These contributions and his global success may have made him an easy target for fraud.
Ontario cops charge 8 people for allegedly selling fake Norval Morrisseau art.
If you want to expand, you have to learn how to do the coloration.
And northern artists apply modern methods to an ancient craft.
Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The street community in Kenora say they feel shamed for being addicts facing their addictions. And medical professionals are left scrambling to provide them with proper care. Tamara Pimentel has more.
Other people that actually lived in the block.
Born and raised in the Kenora area, Lana Ogama spent part of her life on the streets facing her own addictions. Now she's a community support worker doing outreach and harm reduction on those same streets.
There's always some type of racial or discrimination, but it's inevitable living here.
But despite her success in recovery, she says she still faces discrimination, especially when accessing health care. She told APTN about a time she underwent surgery in Kenora.
I felt I had enough courage and built myself up the day before to be honest with them. When I told them that I was in recovery and that I used to be a drug addict, it's like their whole demeanor and the way they looked at me just changed.
Here in the Fellowship Center, a central gathering place, this storage room is in high demand when people need to see a doctor.
So people will come, they'll get their blood test, they'll have a consult with me. We've been trying to have a social worker in here as well, and somebody with lived experience, so the whole team is here. And then it's just constant traffic, effectively.
Dr. Johnny Grech is a family physician, but offers care at this makeshift clinic. He says most of the street community would rather come here than a local doctor's office.
We offer a clinic here every week, but it's not really fit for purpose. I worry that if this is where people feel that their medical needs are being met and, this is what I'm worth, it kind of makes you think that I'm kind of worthless. 5
unhoused people died in 8 weeks over December and January. Dr. Grech says limited housing leads to drug use. The only options for a warm space are the Fellowship Center during the day and one overnight shelter with very limited space. 44 beds for the roughly 250 unhoused.
So for many people, the choice is, I'm going to stay awake all night. You don't want to die of exposure, because that very much is likely to happen if you're in the -20s to -40s. If you smoke or if you inject with meth, at least that kind of keeps your body awake for that much longer.
Ogama says her next visit to a doctor will likely be in Thunder Bay or Winnipeg, where no one will know about her dark past. But she keeps her spirits up to spread positivity to the people she helps.
I try to be happy because there's already people out here feeling low and stuff, and instead of feeding into that, be the opposite of it. When you're not happy, just smile, because it's going to make you smile anyways.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Kenora.
And you can read much more about this series on the unhoused in Kenora and watch part 1 and 2 over on our website, aptnnews.ca. The Alberta Child and Youth Advocate has released a 10-year report from their government independence in 2012 until the end of 2022. And the report shows over 600 children and youth have died or been seriously injured in that time while under government child welfare and child intervention services. APTN's Chris Stewart sat down with the advocate to hear her thoughts.
Yeah, that's like 60 a year, more than 60 a year.
The job of the Alberta Child and Youth Advocate is to investigate deaths and serious injuries that happen to children and youth who are under the protection of the province's intervention and welfare services, and give that child a voice and find solutions to prevent future incidents. Each year, a report is made available to the government and the public with those recommendations. This new report goes back to when the office became independent from the government in 2012. Indigenous people make up 6.5% of Alberta's population, but make up 57% of the 634 deaths or serious injuries reported in the past decade. That averages 36 deaths or serious injuries each year for 10 years. APTN asked the child advocate, Terry Pelton, what her biggest concerns are.
What we're continuing to see is that child intervention or child welfare services continue to be over-involved in the lives of Indigenous young people and their families. We see a number of suicides, a really concerning number of deaths related to substances and opioids. And it continues to be a problem for young people transitioning away from children's services care. They don't have enough supports, and so we're seeing really an increased number of young people between 18 and 22, 23 passing away.
Pelton says that governments need to help Indigenous communities work to keep their youth at home.
Nations need to be supported to take care of their own kids. There was legislation enacted, federal legislation, about 2 years ago, and which allows them to care for their own children and have their own child welfare laws. The government needs to support them to exercise their inherent rights to care for their kids.
She says more supports are needed for youth who age out of the child welfare system. Too many are dying of overdoses and suicide.
They need tailored supports and services specific to who they are and what their individual needs are, and they need ongoing supports. So just like you, if you had your children, you're not sending them out the door at 18 and expecting that they're not going to have additional supports, or even at 21. Their brains are developing right up until their late 20s, and they need extra help.
APTN asked if the Alberta government is doing enough to implement the recommendations from the office.
They're doing work towards implementing the recommendations. Most recently, we've seen a number of our recommendations get stopped. They've said that they aren't going to provide further updates, that they feel they've met our recommendations. And when my evaluation committee has looked at their responses, they haven't been adequate for us to assess that they have fully met that recommendation. So I'm pushing a little bit harder and hoping for more transparency between the ministries and government so that the public can be part of those conversations.
Chris Stewart, APTN National News, Edmonton.
Hundreds of people in Iqaluit rely on charity organizations for a warm meal. But this past week, the doors to the local food center have been shut due to a water issue. Our reporter Charlotte Moore-Jacobs brings us this story.
The Cayutavik Community Food Center in Iqaluit says the impact of shutting their doors this week has been felt by many. The not-for-profit organization temporarily closed due to major damage to the facility.
Our oil tank ran dry, and as a result, our furnace failed, and the building froze solid within 24 hours. It was about -50, I think even a little bit colder over the weekend, so we had some extreme cold temperatures. Pretty much every single pipe in the building burst.
Since the end of pandemic-related funding and increased food costs, Executive Director Rachel Blaze says the center is an essential service. And there's a big impact for the community, being unable to deliver their daily lunch program, which serves 450 to 500 meals a day.
So we distributed emergency grocery hampers on Wednesday. We did our produce food box distribution yesterday, and we're doing another emergency food hamper distribution today. None of that would have been possible if the local church that's right beside us, St. Jude's, if they didn't give us access to bathrooms for our staff while we didn't have running water.
In Nunavut, nearly 70% of Inuit homes are food insecure.
I hope that what happens is that government, community members, organizations really start to recognize that when something as simple as a furnace failure means that 500 people in a community of 8,000 don't have access to food, The issue isn't that the furnace failed. The issue is that so many people in the community have inadequate supports to access something as basic as food. And unfortunately, what's happening right now is that that burden is being placed solely on the shoulders of charities.
The Kayutuvik Community Food Center says insurance has been contacted and they are hopeful to open their doors again next week, but repair costs remain unknown at this time. Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News.
Let's hope they can get up and running soon. If you have a piece of art by Norval Morrisseau, do you know if it's fake or not? Because fake Morrisseaus have become big business. Thunder Bay and Ontario Provincial Police announced the arrest of 8 people today for selling fraudulent Morrisseau art. Morrisseau founded the Woodland School, a style of bold lines and vibrantly colored interpretations of ancient Anishinaabe legends. Work claiming to be done by Norval Morrisseau has been sold to unwary buyers for years. Some of the fakes were on display at a press conference in Orillia. Police said 5 of the 8 people arrested are from Thunder Bay. They laid 38 charges and seized more than 1,000 fake works.
Quite simply, his contributions to art and culture are significant. His contributions to Indigenous art and culture are incomparable. These contributions and his global success may have made him an easy target for fraud.
Journalism students on the East Coast are being recognized for their work with Mi'kmaq elders. That story and more still to come. Welcome back. Journalism students at King's College in Halifax have won top prize in this year's Canadian Online Publishing Awards. It's for their story, Kwe Eskasoni, about going out on the land and learning from Mi'kmaq elders. Associate Professor Trina Roach designed the course the story is based on. Of course, Trina was a longtime reporter for APTN News. We spoke with her earlier. Trina, awesome to have you with us. You designed the Mi'kmaq course described in the story. What exactly is it, and what was the reason for creating it in the first place?
Yeah, the Reporting in Mi'kmaq course, we always develop this story sort of based on a theme, and then do multiple stories under that theme. And so last year, a lot of talks with the community. Like, I might have an idea, but the course is intended to work with community to say, hey, what are the stories you want to be told, and who should we talk to? And so a lot of conversations and conservation kind of emerged as a really good theme. There was a lot of important work around Indigenous protected conservation areas in Unama'ki, in Cape Breton. And so a lot of work leading up to the course, and then the students just knocked it out of the park in terms of just talking to people and talking to elders and talking to people involved in communities. And we went on this hike to Glooscap's caves. It was just this really incredible experience, an emotional experience. And then they just did a really great job in reporting. So the award was just a wonderful recognition of the students' work, but also the important work happening in community in Eskasoni that Mi'kmaq are doing.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it there, but what does the award mean for yourself and your students?
I think, there's 4 sort of key principles that underlie the course that we try to get across to students. And it's like respect, responsibility, relationships, and reciprocity. And so those kind of inform, how we approach best practices in Indigenous reporting. So we're talking about that. And I think the award sort of recognizes that those best practices work, right? So the students, I found that the students, because they knew that we were taking the stories back to community, because they had developed relationships and had really approach the stories with respect. They just did such a good job. They took so much care. So I think it's a recognition of the work and the students' work, but it's also a recognition of those core sort of principles that we're really trying to get across to students on how best to report on Indigenous stories.
Aside from obviously the prestige that comes with the award, Trina, what are you hoping is the long-term purpose of the course and how journalists will report on Mi'kmaq issues?
The journalism schools, the TRC in 2015 issued those calls to action, and some of them in particular focused on journalism programs and making sure that journalism students in Canada are graduating with a basic understanding of Indigenous societies, history, treaty relationships, Crown relations, legacy of residential school, all of those really important things, because that hasn't been happening. And just now you see journalism schools answering that call to action, and King's is one of them. And this course is a really key way that we can take these young journalism students into community to learn firsthand. You learn by doing, so they're doing stories, and really putting that call to action into practice, right? Making it real and tangible, and something that the community can also be proud of, that Mi'kmaq people can say, yeah, like those were great stories, and we feel like we benefited from that. So I think it's one small piece in the puzzle of how journalism schools have to answer that call to action. But I think that it's a really important step in the right direction.
Well, Professor Roach, congrats to you and the students, and I'm sure it's going to have an impact out into the future. Thanks for talking with us about it, Trina.
Well, Alan Dennis, thank you.
Time for one more quick break now, and then a story about marrying traditional knowledge with new technology. Stay with us. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And this roadside attraction can be found near Shannonville, Ontario. The Every Child Matters teddy bear is a creation of some neighbors and Jason Carter, who sent in this photo. Great work. Thanks for sending that in, Jason. If you have a photo you'd like to share, send it to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, -2 in Halifax, 1 below in Fredericton. -14 with snow in Kuujjuaq, 10 below with snow in Nain. -1 in Montreal, cloudy and +1 in Val-d'Or. +4 in Sault Ste. Marie, flurries and +2 for North Bay. Cloudy and +5 in Thunder Bay, 0 in Sioux Lookout. -15 with snow in Churchill, 4 below in God's Lake and Norway House. Sunny and -1 for Winnipeg and Dauphin. -4 and sunny in Regina, cloudy and 7 below in North Battleford. -9 with snow in Meadow Lake, 10 below with snow in La Ronge. In northern Alberta, -16 with snow in High Level, 13 below and snow in Fort McMurray. -5 with snow in Edmonton, sunny and +3 for Lethbridge. 6 in Vancouver, 7 above for Victoria. -2 in Prince George, 8 below and sunny in Dease Lake. -22 with snow in Old Crow, flurries and 12 below in Whitehorse. -22 for Yellowknife and Wrigley. -30 in Sax Harbor, 32 below for Colville Lake. -24 in Baker Lake, 20 below in Whale Cove. -15 for Resolute and Arctic Bay. In the north, fur is a staple for Inuit, Dene, and Métis peoples. But with new technology and techniques, artists are taking every opportunity to enhance their skills. Our Charlotte Mort Jacobs has more.
Maybe if we went like this, we could see that.
To the average eye, every pelt is perfect. But after training under a master furrier, these traditional artists will never see the humble fabric the same way again.
We're putting something to the length, we're creating what?
Darkness.
Exactly.
Alyssa Landry is learning to catalog furs based on shine, light, color, and more.
I didn't know sealskin had different kind of shines, and it literally has no under fur, so you can see the different colors when you lay them up.
I see all the value in what you're doing and what you're telling us, but I'm not seeing why that's better than how we were taught.
Marrying traditional knowledge with technique and technology in 6 days isn't an easy feat.
I completely respect the way I was taught, and now you could say my sewing expanded to the other part because it's going to be more garment quality. If you want to expand, you have to learn how to do the coloration.
18 students from across the Northwest Territories are here in Yellowknife's Makerspace. The fur workshop is sponsored by the Territorial Department of Industry, Investment and Tourism.
But now using a fur machine takes it up a level. Patterning changes the way that they can consistently make a product. It's still all done by hand. It's not mass produced, it's slow fashion. But it is enabling them to maybe do a little bit more. Slowly.
It's the first time most have used a furrier machine, streamlining what would have taken hours into minutes. For Bambi Amos, it's also an opportunity in training the trainer about fur. With the furrier machine being donated to the town of Inuvik, she's planning to hold similar workshops for other artists.
And what I've learned is that every fur, every pelt should be stretched using the whole pelt. So that means stretching it, repairing it.
You better find the skins that they work together.
Master furrier and instructor Panos Panakotitis says while European markets use farmed fur governed by rules and guidelines, the more Indigenous artists share their histories in furs, the more the general public will understand the sustainability of Indigenous furs.
If you want to change the way that people understand fur in the fur industry, or fur creation, you need to give them all the information. They need to have the truth. The truth is, yes, I go trapping because my father or my grandfather did it, right? And there's a lot of people here in Canada, North America, actually, they still go trapping.
So what we're going to do is cut this and make it longer to fit all down here.
Camelia Gray says it's been empowering, learning how to repair pelts and efficiently block to save on material. And when she leaves here, she knows her time spent choosing and creating with furs isn't a race, but a marathon.
We have to take our time. Don't push yourself. You know, give yourself time to look at the pattern, find out the colors from shine into darkness. You know, it's just so interesting.
If I'm going to this
Charlotte Mort-Jacobs, APTN National News, Yellowknife.
Great shots there. Thanks for that, Charlotte. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Friday. For much more on anything you've seen here, though, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca. And be sure to tune into APTN tomorrow night for Hockey Night in Canada in Cree. Kicks off at 7 p.m. Eastern Time as the Edmonton Oilers take on the Winnipeg Jets. It's going to be just across the street. Should be quite a game. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for being with us. Have a great night.